Hi everyone, welcome to our parent workshop where we're going to be focusing on verbal reasoning codes and also looking at spatial reasoning. I'd like to introduce Louise Swan to you. Louise is one of our resident tutors, an amazing individual who will be helping me along the way, going through some of the techniques and strategies involved. So as I say, we're going to be focusing on codes within verbal reasoning, and we'll also have an opportunity to look at some of those maybe more challenging spatial reasoning question types as well. I'm actually going to share a series of slides initially with you all. So I hope you'll be able to see these. And I think certainly with a lot of the question types that we teach at Teacher Right under verbal reasoning, they sort of divided up into different sections. So you have some word-related questions. You also have logical, or what we call sort of logical reasoning questions. And we also have codes. If I just sort of show you how that's broken down. These are the four types of questions in verbal reasoning. So you have word question types, things like synonyms, antonyms, move a letter, analogies, word meaning. There's lots of different types of those that your children will be very familiar with. And then we've got code question types, the ones we're going to be looking at this afternoon. Number related questions, which I know for some parents, they always say, well, why are there numbers involved in verbal reasoning? Well, it's all to do with the logical thinking. So there are a lot of number related questions. And also we've got logical questions as well. Just again, where this has very much stemmed from, that we know that for children going for Buckinghamshire and the Berkshire test, including Kendrick and the Slough Consortium, not Reading Boys, of course, but for Kendrick and the Slough Consortium, then children will be taking a GL assessment test. And that obviously has moved away from CEM. And this change we made back in block 3. So we've been going through this for quite a few of those students that were already doing CEM from September. We reverted then to GL. Of course, if you are a parent who's got a child in Buckinghamshire, then you were actually doing GL from the start of the academic year. So not a lot has changed, but certainly for those children who are tackling Kendrick and the Slough Consortium, it did mean that we had to revert to that syllabus. And it's important to realise there are differences. GL assessment don't actually provide a huge amount of materials to practice. I suppose as the exam writer, they wouldn't. But what I will do now is just put into the chat feed a link, which I think we've probably emailed out a number of times to you anyway, but that link will take you to the GL assessment website where you can download free familiarization materials across all 4 subject areas. You have to remember that this change was made because CM will only be offering online testing. GL assessment, of course, do paper-based exams, hence the reason why those local authorities would rather opt for a paper-based test rather than an online test. So all our centres, and these are some of the logos of some of the centres we work in, have all moved to a GL assessment syllabus. And the main difference in the question types come in verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning, but also the inclusion of spelling, punctuation and grammar. And I will just announce now that we will be doing very soon, in the next couple of weeks, we will be doing an English parent workshop. And I'm very fortunate to have Louise with me on that one as well, because her expertise also span very much into sort of comprehension skills and how to build children's spelling, punctuation and grammar skills up. So we look forward to doing that together as well. So that gives you a bit of background, hence why we wanted to do a little bit more for you in regards to looking at GL assessment. And I'm going to fast forward in the slide. So I'm going to sort of go past the word related questions and then have a look at some of these code questions. So we're going to start by looking at something called word connections. And we've sort of classified these, even though they're words involved, but under a code question. I just want to have a look at this example with you, just so you're clear about what these look like. So I'm making it a little bit bigger, so it's easier for us to see. So just looking at the example, we have 2 words on the outside, and we have a word in the middle. And in this instance, you can see here, we've got Matt. And we have to use the 2 words on the outside, so word 1 here and word 2 here, to make that word in the middle. And what happens is we need to draw the letters from either side and make that word in the middle. So it is very much code related. Now, the way that we would ask the students to think about this is they can number the position of where those letters are. So, for example, if you look at man, then we would say that's position 1, 2, and 3. So my M is 1, my 2 is A, and my N is 3. Now, the words do get quite long. Sometimes they could be up to 7 letters long sometimes. So that would apply again, that the children would need to put the position of each of those letters. And we'll do the same on the other side with tip. So we've got 4. And I would say with the children doing this, they need to make their writing quite small, so they line them up, probably smaller than what I can make it here on the screen, but you get the idea. Now, if we look at the M, we would say, right, that's position 1. Where's the A come from? That's position 2. And where have I taken the T from? That's position 4. So the code that I need over here is 1, 2, 4. So very quickly, I just write the numbers above for here. Always find doing it on the screen. Unfortunately, I can't do it as quickly as what I'd want to, but you can imagine children very quickly writing those numbers. Number 1 is B. And at this point, I'd want to have a quick look at my answer options. Now I can see there's a D, so I know that one's not correct. We've got a W over here. So I'm now reliant on going to the second or the third letter. We will need to do the second because we've got 2 E's and a U. So let's go to the second one. We can see we've got a U there. So I know then actually I can rule out beg and I can rule out bed. And I'm not going to worry about doing the third letter because I've only got one option left. Now, Louise and I often talk about doing things as quickly as you can, that you want to be very efficient in the exam. And what we mean by that is you don't want to necessarily have to work every single thing out. And if you do that in the exam, you are very likely to run out of time. So using your multiple choice sheet is really crucial in these kind of questions, because it might be, for example, you work out the first letter and that's the only letter within that option. So you don't need to work out all the others. And certainly the test is designed like that, that children don't need to do every single bit. However, if children have time left, one of the good checking mechanisms here is to actually go back to the questions and actually maybe do it a little bit more just to make sure and confirm that you've got it right. So there's options there if children need to do that. Lou, is there anything else you want to say about this particular question type?
I actually just would like to reiterate what you've said about neatness. I see a lot in the children's books of really badly formed letters and numbers and very sort of slapdash marking where they might do a cross like that and they just sort of whiz it across the page and it runs into something else. And accuracy really relies on them doing things neatly, and they don't always see the importance of that. But I saw somebody doing a number 4 today and it was just unrecognizable, and it confuses them a lot if they can't even understand their own. So I would just reiterate, be small, make sure you've got a sharp pencil and be careful.
Thanks, Lou. And I think that comes, doesn't it, with certainly, you mentioned number 4. I often see it with like number 7s and number 1s as well, that, you know, is there an element where they put a line through it to distinguish? Does it, you know, just making sure their numbers are really, really clear. Now, obviously, with a lot of these kind of questions, particularly when we show you an example like this, these examples are a lot easier than what they would actually do in the test, but it gives them that reassurance they know what they've got to do. So we're going to have a look at some similar questions to these word connection ones. Now, what you will see here is that I've actually written the numbers already for the position. The reason I did that was because when I found myself doing it earlier, I was sort of my pen was a bit too thick and it was quite difficult to line them up. So hopefully this helps. We've got 3 questions there that we would like you to have a go at. And you can put the answer in the chat if you want. What we also find with these is that sometimes there are 2 options. So for example, if you look at zip here, we've got actually 2 Zs. So it's, well, do I take from position 3 or do I take from position 4? Slightly unusual example because this one actually has 2 Ts. So I know that my first one begins with a T, but I would have also known that if I'd looked at the answer options because they all begin with a T. So what we would say to children on that kind of question is, don't worry about working out that it's a T. You know that. Go straight to your second letter. And if we do that, we've got an I. That's position 9. If we go to position 9 here, we know it's an A. So we've got T-A already. So already I can say, well, it's not that one. It's not that one. It could be all of the others. And we've got an R, a B, and an N. And in this situation, the children would have to do all 3 letters. So what we're going to do then is we're going to go and look at the third letter, and we've got a P. That comes from position 1. Position 1 over here is N. So sorry, just 2 letters there. You wouldn't worry about the T. So A-N, tan. So I know that the answer is A. The crossing out element, which we talk about a lot at Teacher Right, we're always saying to the children, right, try and limit your choices. Get rid of that one. Get rid of that one. On their question paper, their answer options will often be there, as well as on the multiple choice sheet. But the reminder to the kids, and we're certainly talking a lot about that now that we're in block 6, is don't actually cross out on the multiple choice sheet. You can only do that on your actual question sheet. I think the other thing to be aware of here is you've got lots of blank space around the question, and your jottings are really important. Sometimes with it, when I know like it's a 3-letter word or a 4-letter word, I'll encourage the kids just to do, say, 4 spaces, again, so I can write the letter on top, just again to make it easier in terms of how they record that down. Have a go at 17 and 18 and see what word you get. And then we'll just go through those quickly together in a minute. One of the questions we do get asked around sort of each question type is how long should the children take? And when we look at sort of word related questions, particularly things like compound words or closest in meaning or move a letter, you'd be looking at sort of 10 to 15 seconds, no more than that, because children have got to make fairly quick judgments. Question types like this automatically take longer. But if children can be working sort of between 30 and 45 seconds, then we're fairly guaranteed they're going to get through the questions within their paper. So again, the more they practice them, the better they will get. Lou, would you mind going through 17?
Yes, okay. So we've made sky, and we can see that we've used either number 4 or number 6. So it's going to be either L or it's going to be U. And that's how, just as Chris has done it, I put the 2 options. Then we've got a K, which is either 1 or 5. So we've got an A or an E. And then we've got Y, which is clearly a 7. So we're looking at a P. So now we've got to try and make a word from those that matches at the bottom, and clearly it's lap. I think it's worth noting, Chris, that some of the books we give them in homework don't have options. They've got to find the word, and there's no option to choose from. And if they get a word, as in, if you look at 18, you've got saps. And some children, if they hadn't got it as an option in their homework, would be thinking, is that a word or is it not? They don't need to worry in the exam because the options are there. So that makes it a bit easier for them. They're not looking at that 6 letters that Chris has just done in red. They're not looking at those and thinking, oh, what word can I make? There are 5 options there. So they've just got to find it. So that makes it slightly easier.
Thanks, Louise. I think that's the perfect time just to show parents, obviously, this is the multiple choice sheet. This is what a multiple choice sheet for GL assessment will look like. And as you can see here, we've got the answers written down. The one we were just looking at, number 17 there, you might remember that the answer was lap. So the idea would be that the child would mark it like that with a horizontal line, and that would be the answer. If they make a mistake, they must rub it out and then put the right answer in. Remember, these are marked by a computer, so these marks, it's really important. One of the things we talked to the children about in their recent mock exams was actually making a slightly firmer line just to indicate what that answer is. But just reinforcing what Louise said there about the words, that, you know, if children are unsure about the words' meanings, they may decide, actually, I think I've got that wrong. And they'll try something else. So again, knowing little words can sometimes just be as important as some of the bigger ones. We'll just go back to those questions again, and we'll just finish off here. And I thought that certainly 17 was interesting because there was lots of options there, wasn't there? But it is important that they can make that three-letter word. So let's just do this one together quickly. So the I, we know, is in position 8. So if we go to position 8 over here, we've got an S. So we know that it begins with an S. In actual fact, we know they all begin with an S, so we could have started off with that. Then we go to D, and we know it's the third position, or we know we need an A in the third position. And this will allow me now to rule out the ones that I know it can't be, because there's not an A there, it's not an A there, and there's not an A there. I'm just down to 2. In actual fact, if I get my third letter, I'm okay, I've got my answer. So the E is position 2. And if I go to position 2, I know I've got the W. I can rule out SAPs, and then we've got SAWs.
I think it's worth noticing, Chris, that some of the children get so good at these that they don't feel the need to write the numbers over the top.
Yeah.
And that's fine if they're accurate. It's just a case of them checking and thinking, am I getting enough of these right to feel that I'm accurate doing it without that? But with practice, they can get really good at it. You know, some children can just look at a word like pedal and know that's got 5 letters, and therefore know that the second letter in the second word is going to be number 7 without writing it down.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of practice.
It does, and I think you're right, Lou. I think this is a bit of a comfort blanket, these kind of numbers over the top of the letters, and you're pretty much guaranteed if you do apply this technique, you aren't going to get it wrong. Where we do know, though, it is about trying to work quickly. And like Lou says, if children are able to do it without having to do that, and they can remember the positions, that's fine. But that element of recording keeps a sort of a track of where you are, because you can imagine here, if you worked out that it was SA, and you're sort of storing that in your mind, and it's like, well, the third letter, right, is it a P, is it a W? You can then lose track a little bit of where you are. So this is why these kind of questions, the more you do, certainly the better you get.
I think all you need to do, don't you, Chris, is just if you notice that your children are not using the lettering, just check that they're getting the right answers.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
If they are, then fine. But if they're not, go back to that strategy.
So there are lots more that can be practiced, and that link that I sent you earlier, if you do want to delve into those, there's free tests actually for verbal reasoning. There are more of those, and the answers are in the parent guide, so well worth doing if you want your child to practice those. But of course, at Teacher Right, we would be practicing these questions within the lessons as well. So just moving on to the next question type, a very, very popular one within GL assessment. This is called double letter series. And this is all about using the alphabet to help them work out the next 2 letters in the series. And there's a very, very straightforward way of working these out. I'm just going to go through the example with you. And we know that with these, where can children potentially go wrong? What are the pitfalls of these? Children can maybe count inaccurately on the alphabet. They maybe don't go forwards. They go backwards. Do they know what happens when I get to A? Well, they have to go to Z. And there is certainly a sense that these do cause problems just because children just miscount. And the answer options tend to be quite close together. And that's, again, another little trick that some of the examiners will play. So if they're sort of 1 out or 2 out in their counting, they may go for a different option. So what we ask the students to think about is counting from the first letter of each pair. So we're not going from C to Q, we're going from C to D to E to F. Now, in that situation, of course, that's really easy because they're all consecutive letters. So we go to F, and then we, of course, go to G as our next letter in the series. So it's all about identifying the pattern. Now, once we've done the first letter, we're then going to go and look at the second letter of each pair. And this one just repeats. So it's Q and Q. Then I go to P and P. So we're in this instance going backwards. So I need to go backwards to the next letter because, of course, they come in pairs. And, of course, I need an O. The other thing to remember on these kind of questions as well is that they would never expect the children to do huge jumps. So what do I mean by that? Right, if I'm going from C to Y, I'm not going to be going C all the way to Y like that. The expectation would be that you would find the shorter route. Now, I tend to ask the children when we do these kind of questions to add a little bit of the alphabet on at the end. You don't need to do very many letters, but let's say we did 5 letters at the end of the alphabet. And you've got to remember, this alphabet is like a circle. So my example that I gave you was C to Y. So how many jumps is that? Well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, minus 4. Rather than feeling I need to go from C to Y all the way to the end. That wouldn't be something the children would be asked to do because there's too many jumps involved. So it is about finding the shortcuts. The other thing to remember on these as well is that sometimes they will utilize what we call a mirrored alphabet. And what do we mean by a mirrored alphabet? Well, if I get my symmetrical line here, and if I was to draw it right the way down through M and N, each of the letters has a pair. So A to Z, B to Y, C to X, D to W, and so on until we get to M and N in the middle. And that could be a pattern they might use. They might use a mirrored pairs sequence. And it is worth children learning their mirrored letters. And we're going to look at a question type a little bit later called letter analogies. And that also relies on those mirrored pairs. Lou, I know when we had a little chat earlier at Gerard's Cross, you were talking to me a little bit about sort of knowing the alphabet. We talked about it quite intimately, didn't we? About sort of knowing the alphabet really, really well. Do you want to just discuss that? Because I know you give some good examples.
So the children like to put their pencil, if they're going, say, from B to E, they put their pencil on B and they loop it over to C, D, E, F and count it as a +4. But if they're doing that for a lot of questions, it gets very messy. There's a lot of rubbing out and it's quite slow. So what is really good is if they know their alphabet so well, not just be able to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but if I said to one of the children F and they had to go to the next 3, so I go F, G, H, I, that's a +3. So if you can take me anywhere, if I said W, I'd go W, X, Y, Z. This little tap on the head reminds them they're not counting the W, they're just going X, Y, Z, and that's 3. But you could practice that with your children. Just give them a letter and say, give me the next 3. And they have to go STU. And it's so much quicker and so much more efficient. Same as going backwards. If they can learn Z, Y, X, W, V, U, T, S, R, Q, P, and so on backwards, and then they can leap at any letter and go backwards. And it saves a lot of that pencil jumping, pencil rubbing out, and so on. And it can be actually quite accurate. But they do have to learn their alphabet really well.
Thanks, Louise. And I think just practicing little things like that in the car. I know you've heard me before talk about the car as a great place to do sort of times tables thing, but I also think things like knowing your alphabet really, really well and getting them to sort of jump about, adding 4 on, taking away 5, what letter am I on? It's just really, really good practice for them. Often when we start teaching this as a question type, children, I know my alphabet, I know it really well. Mm-hmm. Yes, but do you know how to count on your alphabet and move sort of swiftly between the letters? And of course, as they get into these, they realize that actually it's all about knowing it really, really well.
And there are a lot of marks to be gained on those questions, Chris, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely, Lou. Yeah, I think these are... those. I think you're right, Louise. I think really, you compare it to some of the word-related questions, things like synonyms, things like that. These are quite easy marks. If you apply the technique that you've been taught, you shouldn't really get these wrong. But what we do know, it's not just about getting them right. There's an element of speed and accuracy that needs to be there as well. You know, the speed element must be.
And it comes with practice. When the children say, how can I get better? The more you practice, the quicker you'll get. And it can be a game changer, I think, with the amount of marks you can procure from them.
Thanks, Lou. I'm moving Billy over slightly. He's just saying counting accurately on the alphabet is important on these questions. Also remembering to count forwards and backwards. So just going to make it slightly larger again. I feel that sometimes these are a bit small, these slides. So we've got 3 questions there. And again, I'd like you to have a go at those for us. See how you get on. Do feel free to type the answers in the chat feed as well and see how you're getting on. Okay, well done if you've managed to do all 3. I know I didn't give you very long there, but we'll just go through them very, very quickly again, just to sort of point out what we would expect the children to do. I'm very much about sort of jotting things down, crossing things out, and that's how my brain works, definitely. But again, back to what Louise said earlier, there are some children who can just do these without having to record too much. They just need to be a little bit careful sometimes with the patterns. And my golden rule really is to try and look at 3 letters before you make a decision on what's happening, because your sequences can vary. So for example, you might have, I don't know, +1, +2. It may not be +3 next. It might be +1 again, and then +2. So you just need to be a little bit careful that you know exactly what is happening. And as you can imagine on this example I've given you, you know, it could go +1, +2. Right, my next jump would be +3, and my next jump would be +4. So you're going to get a very different answer depending on which strategy you go with. So my three is my golden rule, really.
But I've even seen them do +1, +2, +3, +1, +2, +3.
Yes, yeah. Just need to be really, really careful that they know exactly what's happening. So we've got A, C, E, G here. So again, A, C, E, G is +2. Now, what I'd sometimes say to the children is if you just write +2 between the gaps, you know exactly what's going to be happening. You're going to be adding 2 on to G. So our first letter is I. And very similar to what we said last time, use that multiple choice sheet because it will give you a really clear indication, right, I've got the right letter. Because imagine if you didn't get I, just imagine that I got an, I don't know, K, for example. K is not one of my answer options. So I know I've gone wrong. So I need to go back and start again. Having a look then at the second letter, I'm going QM. So this is quite a big jump, really. So Q to M is 1, 2, 3, 4 backwards. So I'm going to put -4. Then we're going to go M to I. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty sure it's going to be a takeaway 4. Just double check. I to E. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. So we're going to find E and we're going to go back 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's A. And again, if we look at the answer options, there you've got I, A as my answer. Just to let you know what these are if you did do them, XU was the answer to that one. So it was C. And then this one was EU. Just a point about answer options as well. There is no reason why, for example, if all those answers were D, that couldn't be right within the exam. Children have never been able to identify the pattern. So it doesn't go like, oh, well, my answer was A, then it was B. Oh, the next answer must be C. And it is worth talking to your child about that, because I do know some kids over the years who have said, oh, I know exactly what the pattern was. And it's like, well, no, there won't be anything like that within the test, but you can't sort of outsmart it in that way. Anything else, Lou, to mention about those?
I can't think of anything.
No.
You said you're coming on to letter mirror pairs, aren't we?
Yes, exactly. Yes, we will come on to those. Just before we do, though, just to highlight again what that multiple choice sheet looks like. There you go. And again, you can see how close some of those letters are to each other. I always think that's part of it, really. Right, number 13, we're going to have a quick look at these. These are called matching codes, one of the most difficult ones, I think, in the code section. And what do we have to do? Well, the idea is you're given 4 words, 3 number codes, therefore 1 word is superfluous. We don't need it. It's not necessary. But it is sometimes the case, very often the case really, that they would ask you the code for that word that you didn't need. And this is a prime example of that, in actual fact. So let me just quickly go through. I'm just going to make this a little bit larger just so we can all see it again. So what do we need to do? What are we looking out for? Well, we're looking out for numbers in the same position, or potentially letters in the same position. Some children work better by looking where the letters are the same in the same position. Sometimes they prefer using the numbers. When I teach this to students, and I'm sure Lou does exactly the same, sometimes it's not just about looking at the individual number or the individual letter. Pairs of letters can be really useful here. And this is another example of this, because if you look at the 7 and the 2, we know they must be the same letters together. And if we look at our words, there's TS, TS there. So that means that must be TS and that must be TS. Now, that's always a good starting point. We don't know which word it is, but it's a good way of getting going. Sometimes it's just about starting something. Children must not panic if it goes wrong. Oh, no, I haven't quite got the wrong thing. I must try again. So it's a bit of trial and error on these questions sometimes. We're now going to look at that 6. So that's in the second position and the last position. So, for example, I've got an E here. That's second. And I've got an E at the end. I've actually got E at the end on 2 words. So I know then that the 6 is an E. So I'll just write that down. And I'm going to put the E there. Now, this enables me to know that this 8 is actually an L, because you've only got 1 word which has got the E, T, and S. So that makes that let's. I would write a little bit smaller if I was doing this in the exam. This one, therefore, is ants. So ants goes in there. And then this one, because we know the 8 was an L, we learned that from let's, that makes that blue. I've done the hard work. The hard work is about pairing them up. Once you've done the pairing, the questions hopefully should be quite easy to work out. Now, I did say earlier that sometimes the word that's not necessary, and this word it was base, that actually you still need to work the code out. But what you do then is you use the letters and the numbers that you've already got. So B would be 5, the A would be 4, the S would be 2, and the E was 6. And if you look down here, down the bottom here, where I've got my answer options, you can see there 5, 4, 2, 6 gives you E. I do know with these as well that if children do, and I'm just going to rub out my jottings underneath here, if they do something like this, so we're going to say, right, okay, 8672 is let's, 4172 is going to be ants, and then 5836 is going to be blue. Now, you can see what I've done. I've just drawn a line directly from the code to the word. I see children do this a lot. That's all very well. But then when they come to the questions and they're asked them what the letters stand for in terms of the different numbers, or vice versa, what word represents different numbers, they struggle to actually line it up. I don't know if that's something you've noticed, Louise, at all.
Yes, I have. So basically they've still got to do it. They may as well do it in the first place.
Exactly. So they've matched them up, which is brilliant. That's really good reasoning skills. But as a technique, if you're just drawing a line across actually lining up does make it really, really challenging. So my advice on those would be to do what we suggested. Write quite small, because you need to line up those letters and numbers. Again, more practice can be found in those free familiarization materials. We're using a lot of the booklets as well at the moment in our lessons, but we would certainly advise children to practice those ones, because they are seen to be a little bit tricky, but hopefully good fun as well. I think actually trying to match those up is quite a game, really. It's quite a puzzle, isn't it, to try and solve those. So yeah, have a bit of fun with those.
I tend to leave those till last.
Yeah, and there is that part actually, Lou, isn't there, that because they do take a bit longer, they do often come at the end of the paper. I'm not necessarily saying that would happen for students this year, but if it does, then yeah, doing all the others that you can do quickly, and then maybe coming to those at the end, because they do take a little bit longer to work out. Again, I just wanted to show and highlight to you on the multiple choice sheet how, again, the numbers are often very close together. So it's really important that children do focus on those and take care. Okay, on to letter analogies. So another code related question. I won't spend too long on these because they're actually quite similar to the double letter series that we saw. But there are some things to be conscious of. So as a word analogy would work, so if I said, I don't know, car is to road as train is to track, it's all about establishing a relationship, not as necessarily a sequence like we saw earlier. So if I just sort of bracket it out a little bit, AB is to CD, we've got to understand what the relationship is there, and then that will allow us to understand what relationship we need to create on the second pair. So just going to sort of whiz through this fairly quickly, but just to show you how the jottings might potentially look. A, we don't go from A to B. We go from A to the first letter of the second pair, which is C, and we know, of course, that is +2. We then go to our first letter of the third pair, and we say, right, we've added 2 from A to C, so we're going to add 2 from P, and we get an R. First letter's done, and again, I know I've said it already on a lot of the questions, but I would look at my answer options. No, can't be that one, can't be that one, can't be that one. Oh, I'm down to 2. There's that 50% chance of getting it right now. So I'm now going to go back to the second letter. I'm going to do B to D. That's also +2. And then I'm going to go to Q, and I'm going to add 2 on again. So put a little mark, little dot. 2 on, of course, is S. So I know the answer is D. I can rule out A.
One small thing, Chris, that word is, when I'm first teaching it, when I'm teaching this question type for the first time, I often say to the children, if you find the word difficult, A, B is to C, D, as is to, I'd say, think of the as in the same way. So A is to C, A, B is to C, D, in the same way PQ is to. Because the as is quite a tricky word to understand, but if you put it in the same way, it reminds you that you're doing exactly the same method.
Thanks, Lou. And I think that also applies, doesn't it, to those ones that they may well have, which is a bit like the middle number, but it's sort of, I don't know, 12 is to 48, for example. And then I've got 7 is to. So what's the relationship between 12 and 48? Well, I've timesed it by 4. So I'm going to times 7. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And it is one of those things where they can apply it to numbers as well as letters. I tend to find with letter analogies, they don't tend to add in numbers. They are all letter driven because they provide them with the alphabet. So that's actually what they're using to do those analogies. Okay. I've got a couple more examples here. And again, I could ask you perhaps just to do one of these, maybe 32. Have a go at that one. See if you come up with the same answer that we've got. Happy to walk us through this one, Lou?
Yes. So you've got A is to E. So A in my head, B, C, D, E. So that's a +4. So our B has got to go +4. So B, C, D, E, F. So now Chris can eliminate all the X's. And the second one, S is to O. This time we're going backwards. So S, then R, Q, P, O. That's a -4. We're going backwards 4. And so K is going to go back 4 to J, I, H, G. And there we go.
Thanks, Louise. Well done. And again, it's all about sort of keeping a track of where you've got to, and just again, where can children go wrong on those? Again, miscounting, forgetting that you go from the first letter of each pair. Often we see, for example, in that one, like A to S, children might think they've got to jump that far, but again, not going to happen. We do encourage them, a bit like we did on the double letter series, adding a little bit of the alphabet on is a really good idea. It just helps them just jump around more efficiently, but also, again, remember they're taking the shortest route, but kids remembering what happens when I get to Z, right, I need to move on to A. I always think of the alphabet more as a circle than anything else, and that's a good way. Actually, getting kids to practice writing it in the circle is quite good fun as well.
I always say if you're getting to 7 or 8, you're probably making an error somewhere, because it doesn't often go as far as 7 or 8, does it?
No, exactly. No, exactly. Very unlikely. And I think, if they see C to Y was the example I used earlier, you're sort of going backwards through the alphabet. That's how the multiple choice sheet would look on these. So really important if children have an example question that they do mark that, because we don't want them to think, right, that's 32. They need to make sure they do the example and the practice questions as well. We really emphasize that in mock exams, because I've seen it too often where kids miss out the examples. Say, oh, it doesn't matter, I don't get any points for that. And then they start marking it incorrectly as they go along. So really important. It can cause children to get a little bit flapped if they get to the end and they've not been marking the right answers. Okay, I'm going to move on now to one of the most challenging, I believe, in terms of codes. I know we said that on matching codes, but these are another one that I think sometimes cause a bit of difficulty. So let's have a little conflab about this one. The alphabet is here to help you with these questions. You need to work out a different code for each question. Choose the correct answer and mark it on your answer sheet. Now, I do need to point out here that sometimes it's not always a code that you're trying to create. It may be a word that you're also trying to create. But I think in these ones, it's all codes, but they do vary them. So an example here is...
they're mixed, aren't they, Chris?
They look, yeah.
Code, 2 words, 1 code.
Yeah, yeah. And kids can often go the wrong way. And if they go the wrong way, they get a completely different answer. Yeah. Reading it really, very important they read exactly what they've been given. So an example here is, if the code for foot is ENNS, what is the code for toe? Now, because we're given a word, that means that we work from word to code. Now, this is the way that we would probably teach it in year 4, actually. When you introduce these questions, you would get children to do a little grid. So they would write out foot like this. Then they'd write the code out underneath, ENNS. And then at the top, I'd write toe. And the reason I'm writing it at the top, if you treat this as your word line and this is your code line, you're going to go the right way. And I sometimes get the kids to do an arrow, so I know that they're counting in the correct direction. So F to E, which is the first thing we need to do, is back 1. So that's -1. I then go to T and I -1 and I get an S. I then go to the second letter and I go from O to N. Now, interestingly, we've got an O as well. So we know that must be an N because obviously it's the same jumps. Then I'm going to go to the last letter and we're going to go O to N again, but it's backwards 1. And then we go E, backwards 1 is D. So these are all backwards one. That makes it really simple. A bit like our code questions that we saw earlier in terms of double letter series and things like that. It may be that it goes -1, -2, -3. I've seen some where it sort of goes minus, then plus, minus, then plus. There's all kinds of variations to how you can create a pattern like this. The multiple choice sheet is so useful here, so useful, because it can be that if you identify that the first letters are all the same, or the second letters, you might move to a different letter to enable you to do it a lot quicker. They are very time consuming, these kind of questions, but we do see children go wrong because there's so many ways they can go wrong. They can go the wrong way, they can count inaccurately. And if you look at this one, we've got SND was the answer. Well, over here, I've got SNE. So it's literally one difference between the answer options. Practice certainly makes perfect on these, Lou, doesn't it?
Yes. And I always say to the children that the meanest and the strongest weapon examiners have in the 11 plus is panic. That just take deep breaths, stay calm and think, I know how to do these, and don't rush in the first couple. I think we often find mistakes in the first few because they've rushed and panicked, and when they settle down, it's a little bit better. But panic is their killer weapon.
Yeah. They can also do mirrored relationships as well with these. We've seen that before. I did mention at the beginning when we look at these that you've got the words here, so therefore they're all going to be codes, but it can be you're given the code and you need to work out the word. In that instance, it's making sure it does spell a word, and that again is where the counting and the accuracy comes in. But if you again want more examples of those, I did put it in the chat earlier. For anybody who has arrived slightly later, I will put that in again, just so you've all got it. It's GL produce a limited amount of stuff as the actual question writers of the 11 plus, but a very good link there for downloading verbal English, maths and non-verbal reasoning as well.
And there is always that little bit of testing the vocabulary, because when they go from code to word, they can put some quite tricky words in. You know, that the children might think, have I got that wrong? Because I don't know that as a word. So that's another trick that they use. Exactly.
Well, Louise, thank you very much for helping me go through that with our parents. Just to mention to you parents, I mean, one of the things that we are sort of very keen on at Teacher Right is ensuring that we know all of the sort of quirks, variations of the question types. And we have done that with our staff, that we do go through these questions. You may have seen the title of this, these set of slides is Twilight Session. We've done some Twilight sessions with our staff to make sure they know the approaches, they know the techniques, so they're fully equipped as well, because what we don't want to be doing is spending time in the lessons trying to decipher what's going on. It's really important that we can get straight into it and know the answers. But I hope you found that useful. Just before I move on to the non-verbal reasoning, we're going to have a look at a couple of question types which I know have come up in the centres. But are there any questions around code questions, about how you tackle them, or anything that you'd like to know? I sometimes take no answers as good news, but I'm never quite sure. Okay, well, I hope that made sense. I hope that was clear, and I do think practice makes perfect, certainly on those. Right, going to stop my share for the moment because I'm going to bring up a new set of slides now, whereby we're going to be having a look at some non-verbal reasoning, or more importantly, spatial reasoning. Okay. Just bear with me a moment, just so I can bring this up. Okay, hopefully you can all see that okay. So non-verbal reasoning or spatial reasoning. Now, non-verbal tends to be flat on the page, and those are things like matrices, sequences, find the shape which is most alike, odd ones out, analogies. And these are all questions that we have done a huge amount of at Teacher Right. Also, we have looked at the spatial reasoning questions that are relatively new. Spatial reasoning has been introduced, I think, to make it a little bit more tutor-proof, to add in a different element to the 11 plus. These are question types we are very familiar with, and we still know, just like with the non-verbal reasoning, the more you practice them, the better you will get. Just before we jump into the spatial reasoning, I did want to just highlight our Spans-Ross mnemonic, because sometimes with non-verbal reasoning, this is very applicable. It doesn't really relate quite as much to spatial reasoning, but I still think it's worth having a quick chat about. So when you're looking at different variables or looking at different questions, you need to think about, for example, shape, position, angle, number, shading and size, and also consider things like rotation, overlapping, and symmetry. And these are really useful variables, because sometimes we find with non-verbal that children don't always know exactly what to look for. And that's something that we have reiterated a lot within the lessons, and hopefully will stand them in good stead when they do their exam. And it is something they can actually write out, Spans-Ross, like that, at the top of their page, so they can refer to it if they need to. So just again, sequences, something again that is very common within the 11 plus that comes up. This is an example here of the multiple choice sheet in terms of how children record the answer. With non-verbal, it just tends to be the letters that they're recording down. So they must be really, really careful about what question number they're on as well. So I'm going to fast forward, and I'm going to go to the spatial reasoning. And the question type we're going to have a look at together, first of all, is called block counting. Now, this is relatively new and does require children to be able to establish how many blocks there are in a pile. Now, I put the word pile and stack because the vocabulary is quite important here, that when we're talking about stack, we're talking about sort of one of those towers. When we talk about pile, we're talking about the whole lot together. And the idea behind these is that we need to work out how many blocks are there. A couple of rules that apply here. The blocks will always be the same size. So in this instance, we've got cubes. Cubes are not allowed to float in the air. So the understanding is that the blocks underneath would be the same size and keeps it all upright. So you need to be aware that you're not going to be able to see every single cube. I tend to find with these that I want to sort of break it down a little bit, because I think just looking at it and then being able to count them is going to be quite difficult, because what was my starting point? Where did I finish off? One of my colleagues recently said to me, you can sometimes think of these as complete Rubik's cubes, for example, and do it like that and say, well, how many are missing? And I'll take it away from how many I know are actually there in total. I think that can be a bit dangerous, because not all of them will be like that size. They may vary, but I think it's easier to add up what's there rather than minusing what's not. You may have an opinion on that, but that's my feeling on it. So what we're going to do, first of all, is I'm just going to go through a little strategy in terms of how we would want to do these. So I'm going to put a 2 on here, because this is 2 cubes high. This tower or this stack is too high. This one is also too high. I can't see the one underneath, but I know there has to be one there. And this one is 3 high. This one is also too high. This one is too high. I can just make out this cube here. So that's 1 on the ground. There's 1 here, and there's 1 there. That now covers all of those different cubes. My job now, of course, is to add them up. I tend to find when I'm adding them up, I will cross them out once I've added them. So I'm going to go, right, 4 2s, that gives me 8. Might even record that down just to make sure I don't lose count. Then I've got 3 and 3, that gives me 6. I'm going to cross them out, knowing that I've done them all, add them together, and I get 14. We know in the actual 11 plus, they are, of course, allowed to write on their question booklet. So this is a good strategy to use. This is question 1. So you can imagine that they're not always as easy as that. They do get a little bit more difficult. So I thought I'd share with you a couple more. So this one, a little bit more difficult. I wonder whether you can have a go and see if you can work out how many cubes I have there. You're more than welcome, all of you, to type in the chat what you've got. Don't be scared. give it a go, particularly if there's some children at home who want to have a little crack at it. Thanks for the ones of you who've had a go already. Put some answers in the chat. We have got some different answers, which is always intriguing. Well done. Excellent. Well done. Lots of you doing very well, getting it right, which is great. Okay, everyone, shall we go through? So let's perhaps deal with the ones that we've got on the ground first of all. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. Okay, now I'm going to deal now with my stacks. So actually, I'm just going to write 6 there again, so I don't lose count. Got 2 there, 3 there. This is actually 4 high, that one. And again, the lines obviously give you that indication. We know that this stack here is the same height as that one there. This one here is intriguing because you can just about make out the face there, but because we know the line is drawn in there, we know that that is too high. So again, I'm ready now. I've done them all. I can count them up. So we said we've done the 6 already. Then we've got, we'll do the 2 and the 2, 4, another 4 is 8. So we've got 8 there. And we've got the 3 and the 3 is the 6. So I can now add them up. 12 and 8 is, of course, 20. Some of you did opt for 21. And again, you can see how close the answer options are there. We're ranging really from sort of 17 to 21. So it can be very easy to miscount or not add them up quite correctly.
It was that 2 in the bottom right at the back, Chris. That's those
yeah.
2. Because,
yeah, again, it's just the way it's drawn, isn't it?
Yes.
The spatial element of it is, it's not easy to work out that that is 2, but it's using those lines that you've got. Top. Exactly. It's using the other stacks to guide you on that. Now, we do know, because we know the question writer of non-verbal reasoning very, very well, that there are also different types of blocks that they've started to use as well. So have a look at this one. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger for you all. Again, I think certainly easier on the screen to see it when it's slightly bigger. So I'd like you to work out how many blocks you think are on that one. So as I said earlier, can't have blocks floating in the air, and also every block is the same size. May not be the same orientation, but they will always be the same size. Again, feel free in the chat. Thank you very much for having a go at that previous one. And if you did come along to the Maidenhead non-verbal reasoning workshop, we weren't able to get through all the spatial reasoning questions, hence why we wanted to just go through a few of those with you tonight, just so you can have a look. Again, thank you for having a go. Some different answers again. Okay, thanks again for giving this one a little go. So we're going to have a little look at these blocks now, and I think probably easier if I sort of put the number on them, so we sort of count them as we go, really. So we've got 1, 2, this third one here is sort of stood up on its end. Then we're going to, I think, go around the back here. So we've got 4 here, got the 5th one here, we've got the 6th one here, 7th one here. Now, again, hence why I made it a little bit bigger for you all. This is a sneaky little one here. So I'm going to make that number 8. This is then number 9 sitting on the top. So I hope you all identified that one right at the back. For the ones of you that may have been one out, you may have missed that one. And then here we've got these two here together. So that's 10 and 11. Now, what is really interesting with these is these two blocks, 10 and 11, there must be blocks underneath. Well, 2 underneath, because if we were to draw the line here, we can see that that actually is a block high. So it becomes 12 underneath that one, and then 13 is underneath that one. Because remember, these two blocks cannot float in the air. Now, it's up to you how you could see that, because 12 and 13 could be lying on top of each other, sort of flat like that, or they could be turned up on their end like that. So the answer is 13.
Chris,
Hi.
how can it be 13? Because if you look at the one above 10 and 11, which is 9,
Yes.
that is the same size as both of those, and that should just be one block underneath.
But if you look at it though, it needs to be, it's too high. So look, number 1, you're looking at number 1, yeah?
Yeah.
That is just one on the ground. Well, if I put that underneath, it wouldn't be high enough. It has to be too high.
Oh.
So therefore, I need 2 underneath.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well done though, because that is the kind of thing to think about when you're looking at those, is how high is it? And it would be a common mistake that actually assuming that there would only be 1 under there, but there does need to be 2. So
Okay.
13 on that one. Lua, I know you've done these, haven't you, in class? That probably one of the most difficult question types we've come across in spatial reasoning.
I think they are. I think they're extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And again, my advice would be always leave till the last, those ones.
Yeah.
Perhaps put something, but mark them on your paper.
We've
Don't get stuck on it too long. That's the common mistake, getting stuck on it too long.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, numbering them, crossing them out when you're adding them together. I mean, that's probably more applicable when you do these kind of questions. But I would certainly suggest writing the number on each of those blocks. But of course, yes, you're not necessarily going to be seeing all of them. And it's thinking about what is underneath, what's at the back, for example, and just trying to be quite methodical with it. There is also things you can do at home to practice these. And if you are someone who's got blocks or cubes, you can create these kind of questions yourself, where you sort of build it up and then think about how many blocks, how many cubes did you need to actually make it. And certainly with these kind of questions, you can buy little brown cubes. You can easily get them off Amazon. Just type in sort of cubes, and you can purchase yourself some and try and create some of these questions. And that again can be quite good fun as well. There aren't a huge amount out there. Unfortunately, they're sort of limited. We do have a series of these questions that we've sort of made and written ourselves. So yeah, more than happy to share some of those with you if you need some more to practice at home. Lou, hidden shape is another one, isn't it? That we, I think I have mentioned, you quite enjoy these ones.
These, yes.
Yeah.
And I think the trick is with these, if you look at the shape you've got to find, is choosing one bit of it. So maybe choose one square and then look at each option and see if you can find a square. So if you look at N, there isn't one there, is there? So you can eliminate N straight away.
I think the other thing on these, Lou, is to and this is something to just point out to the parents and children that are here, that sometimes these shapes can be rotated. In the examples I'm going to show you tonight, the 3 that we're going to go through, no, they are not rotated. So it's very important you listen again to those instructions that will be on the audio CD, and it will explain to you exactly how these questions are done. But the things that remain the same is the size. So the size of the shape will not change, okay? And also the fact that sometimes inside the shape, there will be lines and things to distract you. But all you're considering is the outline. It's the outline that you need to worry about, okay? Now, sometimes when you're doing these, to help you a little bit, we might encourage you to actually shade it in a little bit. So you can sort of, with your pencil, you can just sort of shade it in so you can sort of see, well, what is it going to be roughly like inside? And you can do that actually on the questions itself. So you may have already spotted.
Shade it in once I think I've got the answer.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. Sorry. Yeah, not actually the target shape. We call this the target shape. You wouldn't necessarily want to shade that in, but you'll be actually shading in where it is. So when you found the target shape, it's so you don't get distracted by the lines inside, you can just shade it in.
So I've already eliminated N. If I look at that square that I'm taking at the top and go to L, I can see that square at the top, and then I can follow it round to the square on the right. So those two squares are going to fit in L, but the problem is that the bit on the left won't fit in. It's not there. So I can eliminate that. It's just not there. Then if I go to any of those squares and try and place them into M, I still haven't got the right diagonal. It's just not there in M. If I go to P, I can put both of those squares nicely in that situation. I've even got the little line on the left at the bottom of the top square, but I haven't got the right diagonal. It comes out at the top left, but the diagonal's too low. But then I can find it on that last one and shade it in. If I'm lucky and I go to Q first, obviously I've changed some speed. I've gained some speed. So it's having identity, just look at all of them, and you can sort of often eliminate some straight away by just looking at those two cubes and seeing it's not going to work. But then you have to go to the double cubes and see how they will work.
Thanks, Louise. Let's go and give you an opportunity now to say, I know we've got some children here this afternoon, which is great. So hopefully you're picking up some things along the way. So would you like to have a go and see if you can find that hidden shape in either R, S, T, U, or V?
So choose one bit of that shape that you can start hunting for.
You're more than welcome as well. Put your answer. Or someone already has. Someone thinks they found it.
That was quick.
That is very, very sharp. Well done. Well done.
I want to be interested to know what bit was you looked for first.
Oh, well done. Excellent. Some very sharp cookies this afternoon. I don't know if that's parent cookies or children cookies. Excellent. Well done. Some of you having a go on the iPad as well. It's good fun. Right. Okay. Lou, do you want to talk us through this one?
Yes. I mean, you can choose which bit you go for, but I'd be going for that long diagonal at the bottom and looking for that. And
sorry, Lou, this one here,
no,
or this
one on the right, that one.
Oh, this one. Yeah,
I
sorry,
mean,
I agree with you. Yeah, the one on the right.
But
yeah.
I like that one because it's nice and long.
Yeah,
Not being rotated, it's going to be easy to spot. I can see the diagonal in R, but then I don't have the bit that pokes out to the left. I can see a diagonal in S, but again, it doesn't poke out to the left. I can see it just in that square there. I can see the diagonal in T, and when I then start to follow it round, follow it down and up and look for that left stick out and the diagonal, there it is. So finding one point and following it round, I find that really the best strategy there.
Well done, Luke. Exactly. And I think, like you say, once you've found those little bits and you can kind of walk yourself through it, once you've got that long diagonal, like Louise says, then you go straight up, straight along horizontally, then up diagonally, and then across horizontally, up vertically, then down a little bit diagonally. You've sort of completed the route or the path, if you like. And there's certainly nothing wrong with doing that. Some of you, though, may well find that if you see it quickly, you're absolutely certain, you put the answer and on you go. These are, you know, certainly when we talk about sort of shading it in and doing the outline, it's fine. But
always scan all 5 first.
You know, once you're sure, find them and then move swiftly on. But yeah. Now, this last one, I think reason I chose this one was just because how small the target shape is. A little piddly one. Again, just to be aware, you're not rotating it, you're not flipping it, and it has to remain the same size as that little target shape there. So again, if you want to have a go, children or parents, you're more than welcome to put the answer directly into the chat as well. You'd have to really be a bit of a detective on this, really look carefully at each of those designs. We call these designs here. Where is that target shape hidden? Oh, it's a bit of a race, I think, for some of you. Oh, wow. Got 4 answers already. Louise, I'd like to just say they are all totally correct.
They are. They're sharp.
They are good today. Well done, guys.
Again,
Right.
I'd be interested to know what you went for. I went for the curve, looking for the curve.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that little curve is really interesting there. And I did find with this that when I was looking at this one, my eyes were certainly drawn into C because of this bit here and the curve. But of course, that can't be right.
No.
Because it would be flipped.
Yeah, it can only be on 1/4 of that circle.
Yeah, exactly.
On the bottom right.
Yeah.
So then that limits what you look at. You eliminated A straight away because you haven't got the back. And again, neither of those circles have got the back. But when you go to C, you've got the curve, but you haven't got the straight back.
And there's sort of these 2 areas here. There's that one there and that one there. That's
curve.
trying to catch you out, isn't it? Yeah.
Wrong. You've got to go for a top to bottom left curve.
This one here is just too big, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's flipped.
And it's flipped as well, yeah.
So it's got to be, if you look at that, if you say from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, that's got to be the curve on the circle. It's got to be 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And then you get the back. So it is indeed E, as everybody found.
I did find, Lou, with those, like, it's interesting you just relating it there to a clock face, that, you know, sometimes the way you describe things in sort of everyday shapes can really help. And just trying to, you know, these, when you think about it, the world is made up of shapes anyway, and we're surrounded by them. So, you know, talking about it in those ways, I think can be a useful way of describing it. And the other thing to remind you, parents as well, when you're doing these kind of questions with children at home, do get them to describe how they've achieved the answer. It's all very well saying, oh, it's E, right, moving on. But to say, look, how did you do that? How did you work that one out? And what you can just find out from doing that is their approach the best one possibly to use? And Louise has already said that, you know, on this one, for example, maybe looking at that diagonal line, on this one here, dividing up into the squares. And, you know, you do need there's a way of working these out whereby, you know, if you divide, particularly the more complicated shapes, dividing them up into little shapes as well.
I always say to my children that you've got 3 weapons with NVR. You've got Spansros, you've got elimination. Your 3rd weapon is language. Because, and as you said, Chris, get children to explain how they know and how they found it. Because if they can explain to you and use good language, then they're using good language when they're thinking. If you haven't got the language to speak out loud, you haven't got the language to speak in your head. So exactly. You have to practice using that language.
Right. I did say at the beginning that we would keep this session a little bit shorter than 2 hours, but we do have one. Hello.
For question number 3, did you say you can rotate the shape?
No. So it had to remain the same.
If they can rotate it, they will tell you in the question.
Yeah. So in the question, if these were to come up in your examination in September, they will tell you whether the shape can be rotated or not. So it's very important that you read that little blurb or listen to the instructions that will be played out through the CD. Similar to when we do our mock exams, we would say to you, right, they're not rotated or they can be rotated. Just important though to remember that you cannot flip them. Okay, you can rotate them, but then a reflection or a flip is not possible. That will never be something they would do. So again, that's just worth bearing in mind. And the other key element to it, and we already talked a little bit about it, it will always remain the same size. Is that all right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks for asking though. Really good question. Right, I'm going to have a look at the last question type now, which is fold and punch. Just a couple of things to mention about these, particularly how they've sort of evolved over the years. I know when I first saw these, and I first saw these in a CATS test, a cognitive ability test, which some of the children may have done at school before. This is a GL assessment test that is done at different stages through their primary education. Really just to ascertain whether they're making progress and how they're getting on. And it's usually a standardization that you get given. And when I first saw these, then they were all very much circles that were punched. So if you're unfamiliar with these, the idea is that you have a square piece of paper, and these little lines are quite significant as well. You can just about make out that they sort of indicate the midpoint on each of the sides. And the bit of paper is folded and the arrow gives you the direction of the fold, and then a hole is punched, and then you have to imagine what it would be like opened out to what it was like at the beginning, and then you need to ascertain where those holes would be. Now there are things that you can do to practice these. You can use, and if I I've got actually here posted notes that are squares, just little posted notes like that you can use, and the children can fold up, and if you're fortunate enough to have a hole punch, you can punch a hole. Well, of course, once children became very good and very adept at these, they thought actually these aren't maybe hard enough for the children to do. We're going to add in some triangles and some hearts to make them a little bit more difficult. So what we see now, certainly within the books that we use, that there will be ones that have hearts and triangles, not just circles. So it is worth, when you're looking at in your books, try and make sure you are confident with those ones as well as the circular ones as well. You are also allowed with these to draw on there what it will look like when it's folded out. And that's what I just kind of want to illustrate to you now. So if you work backwards, so if we look at this, we know that we've got this line here, which goes, it's also important, of course, we know what direction it's going in. So we're taking it from here and then we're drawing it there. So we know when it folds out, we're going to have a circle, and we're also going to get a circle in here. It's also worth noting where it is in relationship to the line. Again, as Louise has talked a lot about already, and I've mentioned on some of those code questions in verbal, you have that opportunity to eliminate the ones that you know it can't be. So once I've got one circle, I might just have a little look and say, well, I know on D that circle is not there, so I'm going to rule that out. It is here, there it is, so I'm not going to rule out E just yet. C, yeah, looks okay, I've got the circle there. B doesn't look quite correct because I've got 2 down the bottom. Well, I don't want that one over this side at all. So again, I'm going to rule that one out. And then in A, I have got that circle there. I've also got that one directly opposite, and we'll maybe come back to A in a moment. Now, the last fold, sometimes you can have 3 or 4 folds. It sort of depends on the level of difficulty of the question, that we're going to need to take this corner here and take it back over here. So we are going to very much get a mirrored image of what we had down in this bottom right hand corner into the top left. So if I was to mirror that one, we know we'd have it there, and then if I mirror that one, we know we've got it up there. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. Again, don't worry too much if it doesn't look completely accurate. Your circles aren't quite the right size, but you've got a rough idea of where they're going to end up. So I can rule out A. There's far too many circles in there anyway. I only need 4. C, we think that's probably the right one. And E, there's far too many holes punched in that one. So the answer was C.
Something else I find helpful, Chris, is thinking about how many layers of paper there are.
Yep.
If I look at the first fold over, my triangle is going to be 2 layers thick. Then when I fold it again, my paper is going to be 4 layers thick. And when I make the hole, I'm going through 4 layers of paper once, so I should only have 4 dots on the page.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just getting, as I held up that bit of paper earlier, just getting it and actually doing the folds. Sometimes you can even just put a pencil sort of through it. You know, don't stab yourself, but you can make those holes however you kind of want, just to give you an idea about what it looks like when it folds out and sort of test yourself. So once maybe you've had a go in your books or in your question papers, then what you can do then is then have a go with some paper just to sort of reinforce it and see whether you were right or not. So don't be scared of sort of doing these practically. We've got 2 more for you to have a go at. And as I promised you, there would be some ones with triangles and hearts. So is there a spatial reasoning part in the Reading Boys entrance exam? So really good question. No, there is no non-verbal or spatial reasoning in Reading Boys. You will have the verbal English comprehension, and you will then have a maths paper. And then if you're successful in those 2 elements, then they would look at your creative writing, or your third paper, if you like, your creative writing paper. So yeah, I hope that's very clear. There is no non-verbal or spatial reasoning now in the Reading Boys test. Appreciate you coming along and engaging in this, though. Certainly do see these kind of questions, certainly in CATS tests and other entrance exams. But if you are going for Kendrick, and you are going for the Slough Consortium, and you are going for the Buckinghamshire 11+ test, then spatial reasoning is certainly question types that could come up. Yeah. Hello? Hello, did you have a question? No, just a dog barking. Okay, would you like to have a go at this question? Put your answers in your, yeah, I absolutely agree. And sorry, that parent has just responded now just to say some fun exercises to have a go at anyway. And I do very much treat these like puzzles and hopefully a bit of fun. If you're not doing non-verbal in your 11+, non-verbal can also appear in other walks of life. I know my wife went for a job once with Heinz baked beans and had to actually do an aptitude test or a non-verbal spatial reasoning test. So it's in the real world as well. Oh, got some answers to this one, Lou, already. Hopefully this one is relatively straightforward. And we'll just quickly go through and see. So again, very important that children sort of know their symmetry, their reflection. So we've got a triangle here, we've got a circle. So the first thing I think I might do is just sketch in a triangle here, because I know that I'm going to get that from that backward fold if I'm going back that way. And I'm also going to end up with a circle up there as well. So again, just taking it in sort of bite-sized chunks. No, it can't be B. That can't be right because my triangle is not in the right place. That looks okay so far. C is looking fine. D is not correct because we've got this triangle pointing in the wrong direction here. And over here, we've ended up adding a circle opposite the triangle, so we can rule that out. Well done to those children or parents that have answered already. Now, when we're down to 2, the way I would kind of look at this now, I'm very happy to sort of draw in what I need, but it's like, what are the differences between those 2? And here, the evident thing is that the circles, this circle here and this circle here, are in the wrong place because we need them right in the bottom corner. Because remember, they're in the top left and the top right. So we need to go in the right and the left there as well. So we know that the answer is going to be A. I will just draw in what the triangles will look like here, just to show you. 4 in the middle, and they're all sort of facing each other with the vertex looking, one vertex looking at the other one. So there we go. A is absolutely correct. Well done. Right, now, it's always nice to leave you with a bit more of a challenge sometimes. And I did say that sometimes they will use hearts. So hope you're ready for a little bit of love to finish with. Here we go. Right. Would you like to have a go at that? Free folds. See if you can work out which one that one is. Again, work backwards. Lou, are you happy to walk through this one?
Yes, except I haven't got the pen, so I can't draw.
No, that's okay. I have actually, you may have seen here just on the side, I've created some nice little hearts. So if you want to tell me which one you want to put where, then that may well help.
So that triangle is going to come down, and the
the hearts, yeah.
The heart is going to be on the left.
Yeah.
On the second half of it. That's it, on the left at the bottom.
Yeah. I think that's sorry, Lou, just to mention there, Lou, I think that is an interesting fold, isn't it? Actually,
it is.
And realizing that heart will end up rotating around 90 degrees.
I think the way I would do it is I'd look at the diagonal and then look for the reflection.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just understanding what's happening there. This is where a lot of children may go wrong. They may well, for example, put it in whereby, I don't know, it may be up like that, or it could be they think the heart goes around like that.
So you've got to look at it, almost turn it round and see it from put the diagonal upright and then see it.
Yeah. I think
so that rules out D.
Yeah.
Does it rule anything else out? No, it doesn't. Oh, yes, it rules out A as well. Then, when you open it, you've got a centre line of reflection again. So the heart is going, the two curves of the heart are going to bump. As you open it, what's going on there?
Sorry, Lou, I'm just going to do a centre line. And a
line down.
Absolutely.
Down here.
Yeah.
From the top to the bottom centre. Because you can see now that when you open it, you're again going to get a symmetry or a reflection, whichever way you like to look at it. So that's going to rule out. You're going to put your heart. You're going to come down there. Yes. So you've got the reflection. So that rules out B.
Just realised actually I do need another heart here.
So I think if you keep thinking of lines of symmetry and seeing the symmetrical, you can rule out B and E and you end up with C.
Fantastic. Well, some people did go for A, and it might well be that you weren't quite looking at these two at the bottom because they need to be reflections of the two top parts. But well done for
I think looking at that diagonal line of symmetry as that first diagonal comes over is really important.
Absolutely. Practice these ones. Definitely we would really advise you to try and do as many of these as you can, because these are seen as slightly more challenging than some of the other questions. I think if you were to make a comparison between hidden shape and then fold and punch, you would definitely say, well, these are actually a little bit harder.
Really hard.
Do practice them. Lou, thank you very much for going through those with the parents. Guys, thank you very much for joining us. I did say this would be a slightly shorter session than 2 hours. I am just going to stop my share now. I'm actually going to stop the recording as well. But I'd just like to say thank you very much. I'd like to thank Louise very much for joining us and for all the parents for coming along.